Coming up, Nick Saban apparently had a plan. The SEC didn't like it, and it involves the embattled former Ole Miss coach Hugh Freeze. We'll tell you all the details next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. We're glad you're with us for the next 60 minutes. We'll settle in and talk a little bit about the SEC, and I can't think of anything I'd rather do more.
Yeah, you know what? I kind of got a little sadness going on today.
Do you really?
Because I thought about the end of spring practices upon us this weekend, and it's kind of sad because we had a lot of good stuff.
So here's the thing, and I'll do this real quick because I want to get into the show. I like summer, though. So, you know, I like preseason predictions for the college football talk. I just like going to the pool and hanging out and getting a tan. So it's like, while I am sad that spring football is about to end, I enjoy the summer.
I know why you enjoy the summer.
I don't want to wish the summer away.
I know why you enjoy the summer. It's preseason hype list.
Love that.
Odds are starting to come out. The preseason top 25, the athlons are hitting. So BA likes to so-call that in. Yeah, it sure is.
Hot take season. Speaking of which, let's dive in right now here on SEC Country Live with all the big news around the SEC. It's our first and 10. And let me start with item number 1 on our list. Kind of an interesting scenario involving Alabama. First of all, it starts with what is apparently a philosophical change from Alabama coach Nick Saban. He was given a gift, like all college football coaches were, a chance to hire a 10th assistant. And Saban saw a way to sort of reinvent how Alabama handles its practices. He knew he wanted to use that 10th assistant, apparently, for a quarterbacks coach. Now, the quarterbacks coach that he hired is the former Arkansas offensive coordinator, former Central Michigan head coach Dan Enos, to sort of work in concert with brand new offensive coordinator Mike Locksley. During Alabama's media availability over the weekend, Saban was asked by our Mark Burnett how that relationship is working out so far. Here's what Saban said about Locksley and Enos. Take a listen.
I think it's worked out great. I think the quarterbacks are getting a lot more immediate attention, self-gratification. I think the best way to teach is if somebody makes a mistake or makes a good play, either one, to get immediate feedback is probably the best way to learn. With the advent of tempo offense, fastball, players don't get coached as much between plays because they have to go get lined up to play the next play, get the signal, so they don't get that feedback immediately. And I thought that when the offensive coordinator was over on the side running the practice, putting up signs, calling plays, that he's not even in a position to give the quarterback feedback. So I thought it would be good to, when we added a 10th coach, to do like what we've done in the NFL where there was a quarterback coach who would be able to give a guy feedback. And I think Mike and Dan get along really, really well. Both have been successful coordinators in the past, and I think they both have a lot of respect for each other.
So Saban wanted a quarterbacks coach. It seems like Dan Enos and Mike Locksley are working out pretty well together, but that was not, according to a fascinating report by our buddies over at AL.com, the initial plan for Nick Saban. Instead of, I'm assuming, Dan Enos' quarterbacks coach, he apparently wanted his co-offensive coordinator, former Ole Miss coach Hugh Freeze. Now, you know the problem with Freeze. Some of it involves allegedly escorts. Some of it involves not so allegedly NCAA infractions. And apparently, according to AL.com, the SEC stepped in and said, no, 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 you're not bringing Freeze back to our conference, not right now. And the method by which the SEC was able to do this was because of a bylaw that is relatively new and a lot of folks don't know about. AL.com sort of reports this. We'll show you the bylaw. It's bylaw 19.8.1.2, which says, in addition, where a member institution considers hiring an individual who is engaged in unethical conduct as defined under NCAA bylaws or who has participated in activity that resulted or may result in a level 1, level 2, or major infraction, the president or chancellor of that member institution is expected to consult directly with the commissioner prior to offering employment to the individual. In other words, in layman's terms, shame, shame be your name if you try to hire somebody that we don't want you to hire. And for now, that is still Hugh Freeze. What do you make of this?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And you're right. Listen, Nick Saban was told no by Greg Sankey. And my first reaction to this was a couple of different things. First of all, I felt like Nick Saban could have compelled this to happen, in my opinion. Don't you feel like Nick Saban could have made this a big media storm, could have come out and said, well, you know, listen, there's a guy we want to hire, and then Greg Sankey feels the pressure, and then it's kind of hands off. I feel like Nick Saban didn't want to push back against Greg Sankey on this one. There was also a couple other schools involved. LSU reportedly wanted him as an OC. Missouri reached out to him as probably an OC. That in itself is interesting to me. The other thing I looked at before reading those bylaws was I was like, how does Hugh Freeze feel about this? Is there a lawsuit he can bring against Greg Sankey? But you're right. Evidently, Nick Saban being told no, and it reminded me a ton of a few years ago when he hired Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin was the name that nobody could foresee. You know, had left the SEC on bad terms. There's a lot of questions being asked about the person he was. And Nick Saban brings him in, puts him under his wings, and rehabs his career. It looks like that's what he wanted to do, part two. But Greg Sankey said no, no, no.
You could also add into that Steve Sarkisian, who was, USC head coach, but had a real bad issue there involving alcoholism, and he kind of steps away from that. Alabama rehires him. Now he's offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Falcons. So Saban has tried to rehabilitate this a couple of times. I remember when the story first emerged about Alabama meeting with Hugh Freeze, and Saban acknowledged that it happened. I remember you and I both agreed on something, that there was nobody in Tuscaloosa that could tell Saban you can't hire him.
Right.
Greg Burns, a brand new athletic director, he's not going to be able to do that. I don't even know who the university president is at Alabama. Whoever it is not powerful enough to tell Saban you can't have the offensive coordinator you want to have. That's just not going to happen. But the SEC office can not force, may be the wrong word here, because you're right. Politically, Saban could push back on this and maybe get his way. But could compel, hey, can we take a break on this? But the weird thing about the Hugh Freeze stuff here, though, is that to me this almost seems more like the escort type stuff more so than the NCAA type stuff. Because the NCAA penalty, the show cause stuff, or whatever the correct definition is relatively light. If he was a head coach, he gets a 2-game suspension to start his career. But as an assistant coach, there is no penalty that have to be paid here. So therefore, from an NCAA standpoint, Freeze was relatively given a somewhat slap on the wrist. This seems more about whatever may have been going on with those escorts, and that, I guess, is interesting. I guess that it's more, to me, seemingly the off-field behavior than it is the sort of extra benefit behavior. And
in my opinion, I think Greg Sankey would rather us think that it is the off-the-field stuff, and maybe it is. Listen, Greg Sankey looks at it and says, this off-field stuff, it's a bad look. You don't want this guy at Alabama. But I think Greg Sankey feels like his decision holds more weight if it's the off-field stuff. Because you're right, there's not really anything to be said if he's hired on as an assistant coach. There's no suspension, nothing like that going on. So maybe Greg Sankey's words hold a little bit more water when you talk about the off-the-field stuff.
On Facebook, Brad Williams says, why would the SEC stop the hire? I'll ask you, is it embarrassing for Alabama in 2018 to employ Hugh Freeze?
I don't feel like it is. Listen, I was mad when Nick Saban hired Lane Kiffin. I'll tell anybody outright, I did not think it was going to work. I was irritated. I was at Alabama when Lane Kiffin was at Tennessee, when he's hyping up, all this game and trying to do all these things at Tennessee, and then poof, he's gone. He leaves Tennessee in the dark of the night, heads out to USC, does all these crazy things. I was tired of his mouth. I was tired of him talking. So I give a little more cushion to Nick Saban when he believes in a guy like Hugh Freeze. I think that the hire probably would have worked out. Nick Saban had, not his butt beat, but got beat twice by Hugh Freeze. So obviously respects him as a coach. And I think that I always, on this now, after the Lane Kiffin debacle, I refer to Nick Saban and say, hey, listen, if he feels like he's a good hire, he's a good hire.
Our buddy Brandon Walker, doing the SEC Country official account here on Facebook, says, who else thinks that BA should do the whole show in the voice he used to introduce that bylaw? From time to time, you do have to sort of put on your sort of official legalese voice when you're doing some of this kind of stuff. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
So here's the thing that would concern me, though, about Nick Saban here. Certain very powerful, very famous people get to a point where there's no one around them who's able to tell them no anymore. This is how you get Michael Jackson with pale white skin. This is how you get Michael Jordan with like that Hitler mustache a couple years ago. It's like when you achieve a certain celebrity status, nobody can tell you, dude, you're acting like a moron here. What are you doing? You worry about the same thing for Nick Saban here a little bit. Maybe Freeze is a bad idea. Maybe it is humiliating for Alabama to hire an offensive coordinator who had escorts on speed dial, but no one is powerful enough to tell Saban no on this. Maybe getting so big and so powerful that nobody can tell you no, maybe that's actually kind of a bad thing.
Maybe Nick Saban, though, is saying nothing's going to stand in front of me winning more games. That's kind of how I think most Alabama fans feel, most fans feel that watch this football team. Nick Saban's made all the changes in the world. Listen, I don't care how long you've been on my staff. I don't care how long you've been around the program. I don't care what you did in the past life. If you can help this football team win games, he's going to do that. So I see, whereas it possibly could be a bad thing, like he's not surrounding himself with enough people that can make decisions like that, I see a re-energized Nick Saban. I see a Nick Saban that people are probably recruiting against him, saying, he's at the back end of his career. Maybe he's going to retire soon. Nick Saban, to me, keeps reinventing himself, and he's still as hungry to win as he's ever been.
By the way, I guess it sounds like we're having a little bit of a technical issue here and there. I don't know if that's on Facebook or YouTube, both. I'll actually pop over to YouTube to see, but on Facebook, we are working to sort of get that taken care of and getting that squared away. But you just said something I think is kind of interesting here, and this is not me poking at you. I'm honestly trying to, sort of further this discussion here a little bit. You said that maybe he wants to win, and therefore that's why he thinks that Hugh Freeze is a good addition. There's no doubt Freeze is probably a better offensive mind than Mike Loxley or Dan Anderson.
Probably so.
He's just probably a better play caller. But you got a contrast here between like what Nick Saban's doing in Alabama, which could be described by some people as a win at all costs type situation. That's not what one of his chief competitors, Dabo Swinney, is doing at Clemson. Dabo's, by comparison, running a nice guy program.
Right.
By comparison, is running a, hey, we don't process kids type of program. Hey, if we make a scholarship offer to you, we stand by our word. We expect you to stand by your word. It's a little bit different vibe coming out of Clemson, and maybe it's not all genuine. I won't try to argue that one way or another. But it's a different vibe, and some people are going to like that vibe better. So mamas and daddies are paying attention to these coaching decisions, and bringing in essentially the world's most famous John is maybe not the best way to sell yourself to a certain brand of recruit, right?
Yeah, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. But I think that Nick Saban's on the field ability. Listen, we saw Clemson versus Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, and so I think those things play itself out. And I think I definitely agree with you to where I think recruits' families pay attention to that sort of thing. But I think it's like one recruit a year. I don't know if it's 10 recruits are enough to sway things back and forth from Clemson to Alabama or vice versa. I think that you have a couple guys. Now, maybe it's a quarterback. Maybe it is like you asked, a month ago. Maybe the Tagovailoas look at it and say, you know what, I don't love this move. And I can see that. But I don't think that Nick Saban looks at it and says, boy, we would really risk this 18-year-old quarterback. I think he would rather have Hugh Freeze than the hyped-up high school prospect.
All right. It looks like the people on YouTube are having an uninterrupted viewing experience right now. So if you're on Facebook, you want to migrate over to, what's the best way to say it? It's just SEC Country on YouTube, correct?
YouTube.com/SEC.
Okay, so we should all be good on any platform. So watch the show wherever you like it. It sounds like we're working on both sides. Morgan Reckon says he likes watching the show on YouTube better anyway. So a lot of people do. And they're always having a good time over there. So if you want to hop over to the YouTube comment section for a moment to just sort of check them out and hang out, have a good time with them, we'll certainly let you do that. What do you say we do this? Let's take a couple comments here, and then we'll kind of get back on track with our first and 10 in just a moment. Teresa Lowry, by the way, saying, that's it, everybody come on over. She's actually inviting folks to join her over there on the YouTube comment section. We appreciate you doing that there as well. Bo Molinari, also on YouTube, says, yes, recruits' families have an impact, or the uniform craze wouldn't have overtaken the traditional powerhouses. Maybe that's the case. And you mentioned like sort of overtly religious families, like what we think of as the Tagovailoas and families like that. The Hugh Freeze thing does seem like a decision they'd be paying attention to. I'm not telling you that it's a definite no, but it's an eyebrow raiser, right?
No. Listen, I agree with you. It's like I said, though. I think that Nick Saban, if he's weighing that decision, there's more quarterbacks that would do whatever it takes to get to the NFL than I think there are Tagovailoa families. Because listen, Paul Tyson is 4-star quarterback from Alabama. He's already committed, and I don't think that would have changed with the hiring of Hugh Freeze.
AJ Murphy says, it's the topic of the day. How can we hate the Gators today? Let's talk some Florida here on item number 2 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And you mentioned before that I love preseason prediction season. I like it when it's, regular dudes and gals just doing it on the internet, or I especially love when the betting public gets involved and they sort of put their money where their mouth is. Well, BetDSI came out with season win totals, projected win-loss totals for all the SEC teams. We'll do some of this today, some of this throughout the rest of the week. I want to start with Florida here because I thought the Florida number was very interesting. It is an even 7. Now, 7's not an even number, but there's no half attached to this,
Right.
It is just 7. Over 7 wins, under 7 wins for the Florida Gators.
Yeah, you know where I'm sitting on this. We've talked about, and it's not so much like I'm saying that Florida's going to run away with things or that they're going to beat people into the ground. Because I don't know if the depth is there really in the long run for Florida. I think they've got to really dodge some injury bullets, and I think they've got to find a way to bring Kyle Trask along. But it's like I've said all along. When you look at some of the pass rushers they have, when you look at the ability of the offensive line, when you look at what they could have at the top end of the receiving corps, I see no reason why they can't get to 8 wins. And we mentioned this part of the schedule the other day. They've got to win 2 of these 6. They've got to beat Tennessee, FSU, Georgia, South Carolina, LSU, or Mississippi State. 2 of those 6. And they really, in my book, get to 8 wins because I think the other 6 games are pretty slam dunk for them. So I look at 7. I think maybe that's spot on when it comes to Vegas, but I'm putting all my money on getting to 8 and possibly even 9.
I think that at Mississippi State's a really tough game. I think home against LSU is a really tough game. Georgia, obviously, it speaks for itself what it is. I think South Carolina sort of speaks for itself what it is. And right now, I think that you worry about a 6th consecutive loss to Florida State. Now, I'm not going to tell you that Florida doesn't win any of those games, but I think, winning 2 of those games is going to be pretty hard to do for a roster right now that you don't see a lot of sure things. Now, you can run across the entire list and say, well, what if Martez Ivey becomes that rock solid left tackle? What if is it Juwan Taylor, the guy on the other side? What if he becomes the perfect bookend to him on the right side? What if Felipe Franks? What if Jordan Scarlett comes back? What if Van Jefferson finds a home? You can do a lot of what ifs. But when you need that many dominoes to fall in the right direction in the sort of what-if category, they're not all going to break the same way. And right now, to get the 8 that I think Florida needs, you need every single one of those to break in the positive way, and that's just not likely to happen for any team, Florida included.
Well, let me circle what I don't think are what-ifs for Florida right now. I don't think the wide receiver position – now, obviously, they've got to get Van Jefferson and the guy from Ohio State eligible, but even without them, I think they're still pretty strong at wide receiver. That's not so much a what-if as what's the ceiling for me. I think the offensive line is going to be good. I don't think that's a what-if for me. I think the pass rushers are going to be good, and I think the secondary is going to be solid. None of those are what-ifs. I also like what I've seen from the running back position back in the spring game this past weekend. So there are some what-ifs. Obviously the biggest what-if is going to be the quarterback position. What are you going to get out of that? But the top end of the roster to me says enough, and there's enough talent left over from some of the teams that Jim McElwain had when you talk about some of those pass rushers that are dominant in the SEC right now to where – listen, maybe you don't beat FSU, but Willie Taggart in year 1, this is a team that wasn't very good last year. Maybe you don't beat Georgia. Maybe South Carolina gives you a fit, but I'm not that high on LSU. I'm definitely not that high on Tennessee, and we don't even still know what Mississippi State is. So those games are winnable to me. Now, we talk about this all the time. Win the games you're supposed to and then try to win some of the ones you're not. That's exactly what Dan Mullen's doing. He's supposed to win at least 6 games this year, in my opinion. Can you win 2 more on top of that? I think that if they stay healthy, they can.
All right, so a lot of comments rolling in. Greg Steele, one of our buddies, he's a Florida fan. He says the number comes out from BetDSI at 7, but he got an early number from Bradley Bush, who's another one of our Facebook commenters, of 6, and he got $350. Listen, we can't condone this, but it seems like y'all have to get your own economy working there. That sounds fine. Brandon Walker says he's got over 7 for Florida. He thinks they win 9. Of course, Brandon's our buddy from the More Cowbell podcast. He's hanging out with us in the comments section. Sean Nichols says it's 9 wins easy. Terrence Collins, who's a Georgia fan, by the way, he says, I honestly say they should get 8. Ken Sagini, big Florida fan, says, I was at Florida's spring game. It was great. The guys practiced intense, so they had fun at the game. The environment was awesome. Sounds like Ken's kind of high here. Daniel Nasworth on Facebook says, the Gator haters are all over this. Keep hating. Just fuels our fires. Hashtag chomp chomp. Gary Barker says, you can hate Florida all you want, but they're going to be back in the mix again very soon, so get used to it. Clearly, the enthusiasm you see from Gary and Daniel there in the Facebook comment section is reminiscent of what Dan Mullen did talk about when he met with the media on Saturday.
Yeah, and listen, I think it's so interesting to hear kind of the polar opposite opinions on a lot of this because 7 kind of sits right in the middle. Now, you have half the people on here say, man, they won't get to a bowl game. You have other people that say, boy, I think they can get to 10 wins with what they have. And honestly, I think a lot of this has to do with that quarterback position. Listen, if Will Grier was still at quarterback at Florida right now, I don't think anybody has a problem with them, saying they've got 8 or 9 wins under their belt. But they just don't.
Yeah, Will Grier's a big difference.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's just that quarterback position that leaves you asking the questions, and I'm just betting my money on Dan Mullen getting it at least a little bit figured out.
Speaking of quarterbacks and Dan Mullen, Mullen did talk on Saturday after the Orange and Blue game about what he wants to see from these quarterbacks this summer. He thinks that's the most important position in terms of having a big-time productive offseason here heading towards the fall. Here is Mullen on his QBs.
I want to see a lot more out of them moving forward. I saw some really good things. I saw some missed simple things. It gets into the speed of the decision-making, comfort of the offense. And I'll watch them make a great read and get to a second or third read in the progression pretty quickly, make a great throw, move the chains. And then the next one, I'll watch them miss the first read and try to launch one down the field or miss an easy throw that they should make. I'll be honest, there's no more important position during the summer for those guys to work on their own, every day, muscle memory, taking steps, footwork, throw in motion. I don't care if even throwing to receivers, everything over and over and over again so that they are much better players August 4th than they were today.
He's talking about Felipe Franks. I mean, Kyle Trask, this may be relevant for him too. What he's saying right there. I mean, think about what we've heard about Felipe Franks. Almost every single list there from Dan Mullen in terms of here's what I want to see. He's talking about Felipe Franks.
Yeah, and the word is consistency. That's what Felipe Franks has lacked for as long as we saw him on the football last year. It was consistency. Hey, listen, this guy can roll out. He can throw it 80 yards downfield, try to hit somebody, try to throw up to a jump ball to somebody else on his team. And then the next play, it's like he throws it into the ground to somebody out in the flat. And it's all about consistency. And honestly, from the little bit we did see from Kyle Trask the other day, I saw a little bit of what Dan Mullen's talking about, because there is that, man, I'm going to get through my progression. I'm going to look left. I'm going to look off the safety. I'm going to hit the guy on the right. And then you come back out of the huddle and you get pressure in your face and you're dumping it off and you're throwing it into traffic. So I think it mixes in a little bit of both those guys. I don't think that entails Emory Jones to this point for what that's worth for Florida fans.
Did throw a big touchdown on Saturday.
He did. And honestly, Emory Jones looked better than I thought he would Saturday. I mean, he had a lot of zip on his ball. You can see why a lot of college coaches were high on him as a recruit, but it's not there for me just yet.
All right, let's do item number 3 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. A story that I think is interesting. There's another reason why I like this time of year. I think transfers, I don't think the media in general talks enough about them and the impact they can make on a team. LSU's leaning on a few already this year, maybe another one as well, because a graduate transfer running back from Cal, Trey Watson, has plans to visit LSU here coming up in the coming days. And what this says about LSU is potentially pretty interesting. Here's what Alex Hickey, who covers LSU for SEC Country, wrote about the Watson situation. Alex says, the interest in Watson seems to say 2 things. Early enrollee tape Rubens may need more time to develop, and the Tigers' faith in senior Nick Brissett as a starting SEC feature back is not necessarily high. I'm not sure Watson would start over Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but he definitely challenged for the job. I think that assessment by Alex there is kind of spot on. Edwards-Helaire is the guy that I think of far ahead of the other names that he mentions.
Yeah.
But you got to have more than one back, and it sounds like Watson, the graduate transfer, would have an opportunity to sort of slide in and be that number 2 guy for LSU.
That's exactly what it sounds like to me. And when you look at, and Ed Orgeron, he snuck in words about this. You know how he's been talking about the quarterback position battle, and hey, we got him in this room. You haven't really heard that much about the running back battle just in that way. He hasn't really said, boy, this guy's in this room. You know, we definitely got the guy sitting there.
Talked a little bit about backs on Saturday, but not in glowing terms necessarily.
He didn't say, boy, we've got him here. You know, and so you go out and you talk to a guy like this, and back, a couple of years ago, this guy actually had 241 receiving yards, 800 rushing yards. So he's a viable threat, but he's coming off an injury. And I think that this is, like you said, I don't think this is centerpiece at all. I don't think you bring him in and say, boy, this is an every down back for LSU. But I think he could be very complimentary to what LSU is trying to do this year.
The YouTube comment section is blowing up on this. We have a lot of LSU folks who watch the show on YouTube. But an Alabama guy, Roll Tide, on the YouTube comment section says, this sounds like desperation. LSU already has 5 scholarship running backs in their roster, albeit not much experience. Okay, you can call it desperation if you want, but if you have a chance to get a better player, you go out and you get the better player. Even if with 5 scholarship running backs, you should have your guys, you should have your top 2. If you can get better, you get better.
Well, the 5 scholarship running backs, 2 of them aren't on campus yet. And so you really don't know what you have, and you're talking about relying on possibly 2 true freshman running backs that are showing up in the summer to be part of your offense. I think this is, and I hate to even go down this road, but when Jim McElwain was talking last year about Malik Zaire, he's like, listen, we just got to get our numbers in the quarterback room. We want to be better overall as a football team. To me, that was not true. And I said it last year about Florida at the quarterback position. It's not so much about numbers, it's about having the quality. In this instance, I actually think it's about numbers for LSU. You're not going to have the bowling ball back that gets 1,000 carries over the course of a year. Get a couple of guys that can do different situations. And if they're going to air it out as much as I think they are this year, then this guy could be a big piece.
Esteban Estevez says Watson would be a huge pickup for LSU. Clyde going to be the starter, and Watson will be a great number 1-2 punch combo. Plus, Watson is a great special teams player. That's also a really important point to bring up. Cliff Nelson agrees with that, saying that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a good back. Brissett is experienced. We have Provens and Curry coming in. Transfer, no transfer, we are fine. I guess it's the last part of that I admit I do find interesting. Now, I have praised Ed Orgeron's acquisition last offseason of Braden Fehoko. He's eligible for 2018.
Yeah.
The same thing for Jonathan Giles, the other Texas Tech player, a wide receiver. I liked getting Terrence Alexander from Stanford if you're LSU. But there is a point when you have to say, and this is not necessarily a dig at Orgeron, it may be a dig at Les Miles. But hold on. If you need 4 transfer players to compete in the SEC, what in the Sam Thunder happened with the LSU recruiting effort that I got to have 4 transfer players just to go after it and compete in the SEC West.
Yeah.
It seems like something slipped there in Baton Rouge if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, I'll never knock Ed Orgeron for going out and getting these guys. You're
No.
right. How did they find themselves in this situation?
But why
is a
did you
good
need
question.
4 transfers?
Well, the bottom line is you missed on some guys that you didn't think you've missed on. The Terrence Alexander thing comes from the fact that you didn't sign Patrick Surtain. And it just keeps going on. And it's not like they needed Jonathan Giles, but he's going to be a good piece. I mean, that wide receiver core is deep.
I'm not sure they don't need him. I mean,
well, the wide receiver core, I don't know if
I'm
they're
going to tell
ready
you
to
right
play.
now that I'm going to throw the ball to Terrace Marshall. I'm going to throw the ball to Jamar Chase. But those are freshmen. I mean, Giles has been catching passes in college.
They've got other guys, too. I mean, Sullivan's still there. They've still got a couple of big pieces from last year. Rangy guys. I'm not saying they would be over the top with the group they have without Giles, but I think they'd be okay, much like the running back position. I just think, and I agree with Cliff a little bit, where he says we're going to be fine either way. But I think I don't know that you want to be down to Leonard Fournette if a couple of those guys get dinged up along the way and you're down to two true freshmen in Leonard Fournette. I don't think you want that at LSU.
Let me do item number 4 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. We talked yesterday about the Texas A&M spring game, and one of the stories going to come out of that, I think, is the fact that you potentially got a very different kind of quarterback battle going on at A&M compared to some of the other unknown QB situation on the SEC. I think in the case of Nick Starkel and Kellen Mond, you may actually have 2 pretty good quarterbacks, and it's a decision of who's best and who's better equipped to lead Jimbo Fisher's offense. Here via 24/7 Sports is what Jimbo Fisher had to say about these 2 quarterbacks right now coming off the A&M spring game on Saturday. There's no way that we can name a starter right yet. I love that phrase, right yet.
Right yet.
It's such a good Jimboism and fits right in there in College Station.
It makes me feel like a Texan.
It's too early. Both of them haven't had enough work, and we're just really now getting to the offense. As far as the fine-tuning and the nuances of it, that really makes it go. And yet around that quote from Jimbo, there's some positive stuff. It sounds like Kellen Mond, who I was high on a year ago, and you kind of talked me off the ledge on him, sounds like he's better now than he was last season.
Right.
Starkel is fine. It sounds like A&M might have itself a pretty good quarterback here.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any doubt about it. And, watching this game this past weekend, it's like I said, I told you this yesterday. The Texas A&M spring game has been the best one to me by a mile. Okay. I really enjoyed what Jimbo's doing. I love what he's doing with both these quarterbacks. He's put him in similar situations. And I honestly, a year ago I was high on Nick Starkel. I thought Nick Starkel was going to, and obviously he did, and then he gets nicked up and Kellen Mond has to play. But I will say this, Kellen Mond looked more comfortable than I even thought he would on Saturday. I think they both are good quarterbacks. I think Nick Starkel had a hiccup or 2 in the game, and Kellen Mond to me looked like he's really enjoying what Jimbo Fisher's doing. He looked like this guy at some points last year, turnover machine, was really throwing too many interceptions. I thought he looked really comfortable within Jimbo's offense. I don't think he's steer wrong either guy.
There's a comment in the comment section I wanted to read. It comes from an Arkansas fan. And, James Grant says, what about the Arkansas Razorbacks' new coach? Talking about Chad Morris. We're going to talk more about Arkansas later on in the week. I've got some interesting stuff coming out of Fayetteville that I want to address in the show. But we'll talk about Joe Moorhead later on in this show, too, today as well. When you look at first-year coach Joe Moorhead, new coach at Arkansas Chad Morris, man, it's tough being a first-year guy at the same year that Texas A&M brings in a first-year coach that really not that long ago, 5 years ago, won a national championship.
Yeah.
That's really hard to be the best first-year coach in the SEC West when the guy that you're competing with once won a national championship. I mean, that is a big feather in A&M's cap. I've said it before. Over the long haul, I think A&M's going to do good business and big business with Jimbo Fisher. First year, I'm probably not quite as high on, but man, to sell Moorhead, to sell Morris in comparison to a Jimbo, a seasoned veteran who's won national championships as an offensive coordinator and as a head coach, that is a tough comparison.
I agree. And listen, it's like I've said before, when you talk about getting to championships, there's check boxes along the way. You've got to have a good coaching staff. You've got to be able to recruit. You've got to be able to develop. Jimbo Fisher checks off one of those boxes. He's capable of doing it. You look over at Mississippi State, boy, they've got all the development and the players in the world, but what do they have in that coaching checkmark box? You don't know. You don't really know what Joe Moorhead is, so it's tough to really kind of project. You look at Jimbo Fisher and you say, boy, if we can get this guy this talent and get him to where he can recruit at a high level at Texas A&M, then really the sky's the limit. And that's why you got to give kudos to how Texas A&M really ran that coaching search. I think it was the best one in the country.
Stacy Hyman says, let's talk about the real teams in the SEC. UGA and Bama got spring games this weekend. Stacy, we're going to talk about both Georgia and Alabama coming up here in just a moment. Before that, though, let me do item number 5 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And I like it when coaches, especially upstart coaches, little brothers and in-state rivals, I like when people stir the pot, when coaches stir the pot. Not a real intense example of this from South Carolina coach Will Muschamp, but at least some example. Let me show you the tweet here, capturing a quote from Muschamp during one of these speaking tour events. Joe Hughes, the guy who tweets it, Muschamp with a rib for Clemson, he says, while talking about his time at LSU, quote, "We were the real Death Valley, not the one somewhere else." Now, I'm not telling you that's the biggest zinger jab in the world, but you know what? I like South Carolina taking a little bit of a jab here at Clemson. Clemson's a three-time playoff participant, a national champion less than 2 seasons ago. South Carolina wants to be there. That's a small piece of land they're fighting over. Give me Muschamp taking his zingers at Dabo Swinney all day long.
There's no way I'm going to follow you down that path.
Are you serious?
This to me, if I'm a South Carolina fan, I'm irritated with this. I really am. What are you barking at? First of all, you're boasting another program you used to coach at, not your own program. You're talking about, LSU's the real Death Valley. Guess what? LSU's in your conference. You should try to be beating LSU, not talking them up. Second of all, what is it? 34 to 10 in 2017 and 56 to 7 2 years ago. Clemson and South Carolina.
That's when you talk trash.
No,
that's when you talk trash.
That's when Dabo turns around and said, "You know what? Call me when you're in my neighborhood. You're not in my driveway yet. Like you've got to get closer to me before you start talking that kind of trash."
So a few things here. What you're describing from Dabo's perspective is what I try to tell you all the time. Dabo doesn't respond because you don't beef down. I've explained that a million times. But if you're Will Muschamp, you beef up as much as you possibly can because you're trying to raise your stature here. And listen, you're an expert on a lot of stuff. You played in college, you played in the NFL. You're an expert on what happens between the white lines. I've been a fan my entire life. I'm an expert on fan behavior. If you ask a million South Carolina fans, who's the real Death Valley? A million of them will become allies with LSU to say they're the real Death Valley because the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
South Carolina fans don't like LSU, but if it means taking a dig at Clemson, they're all on board for this, and this is how fans behave.
That's possible. To me, this feels like right now, if Paul Johnson were to come out and say, "Boy, Georgia's not any good this year," it's just like that's how
what he should do.
I think it rings hollow. I think people start laughing at you when you say stuff like that because to me, Will Muschamp, you had to pull Jake Bentley out of the game at halftime 2 years ago so he didn't die during this Clemson game. And now you're going to tell me that that's not the real Death Valley. I just, to me, work your way up to where you can start saying things like that.
Mark and Nikki Jackson says, "I'm at the South Carolina spring game every year. Jake Bentley's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country, so obviously they're excited about what they're seeing from South Carolina here." And to go back to your point about, hey, if you're the underdog in the rivalry, you don't say anything. If Muschamp doesn't start beating Clemson eventually, he's going to get fired whether he talks trash or not. And that may seem unfair because Clemson's the national championship program, but if they keep walking the dog with South Carolina every single year, Muschamp's still going to get fired. So it's not like you put yourself more on the hot seat if by trying to stir up trouble. Maybe you get yourself some attention. Too many coaches are too careful about too much. This is one of those things where some coaches would sort of button their mouth and sit real straight and still and hope that Clemson doesn't notice you. You know what? A fighter puts up his dukes. Muschamp's a fighter. Now, he may take it on the chin and be down for the 10 count, but he's a fighter, and I like that.
Now, listen, you use the saying, you always beef up, you never beef down.
That's right.
My saying on the show is you don't poke the bear. Don't go out and poke the bear. Why are you poking the bear if you know that your job hinges on beating Clemson and you're Will Muschamp and you're going to talk trash like that?
Last chance, last comment from me, and it's simply a question for you. What do you get by not poking the bear? What do you gain?
I don't think you gain anything either way. That's what I'm saying. Like, you don't gain anything by saying, "Boy, they're not the real Death Valley." Like, everybody can see right through your comments, right? I mean, like, recruits aren't stupid. Your fans aren't stupid either. They know exactly what's been going on the field the last couple of years.
All right, this is item number 6 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. I do love these over-under season win total projections. Thought it was interesting that both Georgia and Alabama, according to BetDSI, had the same total, 10.5. And if you follow the betting market at all, 10.5 is a monstrous number. You almost never see anything above that. You'll have national championship contenders rarely sort of eclipse 10. Now, when the Vegas stuff comes out later on in the late spring, early summer, my guess is that both Alabama and Georgia are somewhere near 10. 10.5 here, probably a little bit of a half game off or whatever. But nonetheless, that's the only number we have for right now. So my question for you once again is a simple one. Do both Alabama and Georgia win at least 11 games in the regular season? Because that's what the 10.5 is. This is not December, January games. This is the 12 regular season games. Do both Georgia and Alabama win 11 or more regular season games.
It's hard for me to find a scenario looking at these schedules where they both don't win 11 games
Yeah.
at least. I mean, it really is. And you know what's crazy looking at these two schedules? How similar these schedules really are. When you start to match
It
up
is kind of interesting, right?
Bama and Georgia's schedule, I mean, you got Louisville as the opener. Georgia's closing with Georgia Tech. I mean, they both play Tennessee. They both play LSU and Baton Rouge. They both play Auburn. To me, I separate these schedules by saying basically Bama's got Arkansas and Ole Miss. Georgia's got Vandy and Kentucky. And that's really what it boils down to me to. So I look at those schedules and say 11 wins to me should be the bottom of the barrel for these two teams. I think that it's a disappointment if either one of these teams only wins 10 games in the regular season. I really do
Completely agree. Travis Betbeezy in the Facebook comment section says they're both going to lose to Auburn. Again, it is worth pointing out in the regular season they did both lose to Auburn a year ago. Game shifts from Jordan-Hare Stadium to both Bryant-Denny and
But even
Sanford
so,
Stadium.
that's still both teams getting to 11 wins
Yeah.
in the regular season. So, I mean, even you can even factor in an Auburn loss, and they're both getting to 11 wins.
I think that, and look, it goes without saying, I got red and black on right now. Mike played for Alabama, so I'd obviously love to see Georgia win 11 games. I've never tried to lie to y'all about that. I'm sure Mike would love to see Alabama win 11 games. But apart from the fandom situation here for a moment, I do think it's kind of funny to watch the media talk about the SEC this year. There's this sort of desperate hope that it's not this boring. That because obviously 11-1 Georgia, 11-1 Alabama, or 12-0 Alabama would make for a great SEC championship game. That's one game in December. You got 3 months of football to get to that point in time, and if Georgia is just beating people about the head and face in the SEC East, and if Alabama's taking names in the SEC West, that can make for a pretty stale, bland regular season. And you got like all these SEC network guys. Watch out for South Carolina, and we'll hear later on. Watch out for Mississippi State.
Yeah.
A lot of that seems like begging to me. It seems like begging on the part of the media to hope we don't get an outcome that seems to be fairly stark, written in black and white.
Yeah.
That Georgia and Alabama are so far and away the class well ahead of anything else in this league right now.
I don't see it as begging. I really don't, because I've said this before on the show. It is hard to win every game on the schedule. So I think you try to identify the games. You try to look at when they are on the schedule. You try to look at what games are on the road. I think that you do look at South Carolina and Mississippi State as the teams that are possible teams that can jump up and bite you. I don't think anybody's going to predict that either one of those teams, but it's like I've said before in the show. Never in a million years, a couple of years ago, did I predict that Ole Miss was going to beat Alabama in back-to-back years. Or never did I think that Johnny Manziel was going to go into Bryant-Denny and win that game. Never in 2010 did I think Bama would lose at South Carolina. So these games can jump up and bite you. I just don't think, when you set it at 10.5, I think anything less than 11 wins is really not going to happen for me.
You asked me why I love this time of year. The YouTube comment section, the perfect example why. Joe Self says Georgia's going to win 15 games. Hardwired to Self-Destruction says Georgia's going to take 3 L's. You can't be more sort of disparate in your opinion about Georgia than that. And that's why I love these conversations we're able to have this time of year. And I mean, I'll be the first to tell you, if Georgia were to drop 3 games in the regular season, go 9-3, that's an unmitigated disaster. And the really kind things that you've heard about Kirby Smart all this offseason, a lot of that would be taken back next offseason if Georgia were to go 9-3.
Well, and I think Cliff Nelson says it perfectly here, and I tend to agree with him, although I think they have the tools to do this. He says UGA has to learn how to win a season after that much success, now being the hunted and not the hunter. Bama's used to it, and they've done it for for quite some time now. So now Georgia is the hunted football team. Now they will be on that schedule where everybody's kind of circling and saying, listen, this is when a top 5 team comes to town. This is when a top 3 team comes to town. We got a chance to knock them off.
Bo Molinari says Auburn fans have to be shaking their heads at this one, too, in terms of maybe a lack of respect for Auburn. We'll talk about where Auburn finishes in this sort of evaluation later on this week. But as far as what the commenter said about Georgia being a hunter as opposed to being the hunted, what they were a year ago, what they might be now. Kirby Smart has been pretty explicit in his thought process that we want to sort of maintain that edge of being the hunter. He tried the onside kick to start the game against South Carolina, the first game after Georgia had been ranked number 1 by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. That was sort of his symbol of we're going to try to maintain the edge of the hunter, even though we are the reigning SEC champion and now the hunted.
No, I agree with you. I think Kirby Smart, I think he looks at it and he obviously has seen these situations play out. He's well informed on these kind of scenarios. But to me, my concerns are away from Kirby Smart and more about the team leadership, because we know that Georgia has lost a ton of leadership off last year. Those guys came back hungry. They wanted to get back to the top. Now, what is status quo for Georgia? I fully expect them to win 11, if not 12 games. But I look at it and say, if there ever is a chink in the armor, it could be that leadership.
Speaking of the leadership that Georgia's showing this spring and getting ready for its spring game on Saturday, second scrimmage of the spring win down on Saturday. Kirby Smart had been concerned and critical of his defensive line. Sounds like he's a little happier with them after this past weekend and maybe seeing some things he likes from his offense as well. Here is Kirby Smart.
A more balanced scrimmage. We tried to run the ball some more, thinking that we would test the defense, and I thought the defense had one of their better practices when it comes to being able to stop the run. And then the offense kind of dominated the third down period, and the defense had been dominating that. So it was almost a seesaw effect of some of the periods defense had been winning, the offense won, and vice versa. It's very competitive, and I thought the guys played really hard.
Well said by Cliff Nelson in the YouTube comment section. Complacency is a killer of programs, and that's what both Georgia and Alabama are trying to fight against this year. Georgia in a new position. Alabama's been in that spot every year since 2009. All right, item number 7 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list, and I think this is about to be very interesting for a couple of SEC teams at least, maybe even a third if you include LSU. 5-star linebacker Owen Pappoe, who, if you follow a lot of the recruiting rankings and follow a lot of these recruiting events, this guy is testing off the charts right now. One of the best inside linebacker prospects we've seen maybe in a decade, a true potential game-changing player, and initially his college decision was supposed to come on May 5th. That's no longer the date. Pappoe has actually moved it up. Here's the 5-star linebacker explaining that decision.
I know I was told everybody on Twitter is going to be May 5th, but I'm actually moving it to May 1st, so that's when I'm going to announce my commitment. And I really have an idea of who it's going to be. I'm going to make sure I visit two specific schools back-to-back. I ain't going to say who they are, but yeah, I'm going to make sure I visit them back-to-back, and I'm going to make my decision based off of them.
Says he has an idea of what his decision is going to be, and for a long time, one of the schools that's been up there for him, if not the public leader, has been Georgia. But Auburn, the Dogs' rival from the SEC West, has also made a big push here, and Pappoe acknowledges, yeah, there's some things about Gus Malzahn's Tigers he really likes. Here's Pappoe again.
I've said Georgia's my top school. They are. People say Auburn's coming in the picture. I mean, I guess so.
And then as far as what the Georgia coaches are saying to him about all of a sudden this sudden love for Auburn, well, Pappoe kind of laughs when he retells the story of what Georgia coaches have been saying to him about all of that. Here's a little bit more from Pappoe.
Yeah, they like, what's all this talk about Auburn? I'm like, Coach, just let the media be the media. I just told him, if you don't hear something coming from me, just don't listen to it. That's what I told him.
But in the midst of what you just heard from Pappoe, you see the video on the screen where the gloves that he's wearing, obviously that sort of purple and gold LSU hue. He has recently taken a visit to Baton Rouge. Pappoe has said that LSU may be in the mix here just a little bit as well. This is one of those big-time, sort of early, mid-spring, early summer stories of the kind of guy for 2019 class that could change the fortunes of the program where he chooses.
It definitely could. Listen, I was reading up on his, I guess it's the regional for the opening or whatever it is that he was going through, the highest testing that Nike's ever tested. It was something like 4.45 40 and maybe like a 40.5-inch vertical. Is something absolutely ridiculous when you talk about this kid and what he's able to do on a football field. Now, I will say this. I think it bodes well for Georgia in a lot of different ways that he has set his commitment date and has moved up his commitment date, and he's having the answers he's having about Georgia. Because last week, I know a lot of people thought he was trending towards Auburn. You get all the Auburn talk, you got his teammates on campus, they're trying to recruit this guy, trying to get him in the fold, trying to bring him over as one of the top prospects. But the fact that he's ready to make a decision, to me, I think Kirby Smart's been in his ear, and I think Kirby Smart's saying, hey, listen, we need to get this commitment out of you.
Well, yes, a lot of comments coming on the YouTube comment section. Let me read a few of those. Cliff Nelson noticed he was wearing the LSU gloves and a Georgia backpack. He was wearing that Georgia backpack. I will say this, that, I follow this stuff very closely. I like the recruiting stuff. For me, gear is typically a false positive, like the Georgia backpack. I don't know that means much. The gloves, not sure that means much. Kids just like free gear, right? It's like, how many people do you see that are wearing some sweatshirt they were given that's not a school they cheer for, something like that? Kids just like free gear, so you can't read a whole lot into that. Roll Tide says Kirby's using the same methodology as Saban, sealed the borders, Pappoe to Georgia. Somebody else was talking about how I had the smirk on my face about the Pappoe situation. I'm not as confident as some Georgia fans are that Pappoe chooses Georgia on May 1st. I'm just not.
Here's what I'll say, too, because Cliff Nelson brings up this good point. Nothing matters until he signs in December. I'm not sure that this is not a prime flip candidate. I mean, this has got flip written on. No matter who he picks, when it comes to May 1st, no matter who he picks, I'm not sure that holds all the way to the end. Even if he comes out and picks Auburn, I'm not sure Georgia doesn't get him. And if he comes out and picks Georgia, I'm not sure he doesn't see all his teteammates headed to Auburn and say, boy, I'd really like to join them.
Teresa Lowry says the kid loves the media attention. He already knows where he's going. Teresa's a Tennessee fan, of course, too. And Popo at one point in time really flirted with Jeremy Pruitt there publicly a little bit as well. I agree with the first part of this. I'm not so sure I agree with the second part of this. I agree that he does enjoy the media attention. I think it's prerogative to do so. I'm not quite so sure this is a made-up mind.
I don't either. I don't really. I think maybe he knows who he's going to pick on the first, but I'm just telling you, I don't see that holding all the way until December. He's still going to take a couple of visits in the fall. I mean, he's already admitted, listen, probably going to go to Auburn, probably going to go to Georgia. There's still a chance that he gets to either one of those schools before he makes his decision on May 1st as well. And so I'm with you to a certain extent. I do feel like he likes the media, but listen, that's 90% of recruits these days that like the media.
Rick Godby says, we need you, Popo. Come on. He's got the Tennessee big orange colors there in his emojis. Melinda Moe says he's just having a little fun, keeping everybody guessing. He's UGA bound. He very well may be when it's all said and done there. And even if he doesn't choose my favorite school, Georgia, I don't fault you for having fun. I don't fault you for sort of going through this process and enjoying what you have a chance to enjoy there.
I would love to come out and talk against this guy and be like, that's not how it was when I was coming out, 15 years ago, whatever. But it's different times. It's a completely different landscape as far as recruits go, so it's going to change. I'm not going to be that old man saying.
And I want to be very frank here. The reason why he's getting so much attention is he's worth it. And I'm not telling you no player's a sure thing at the college level, but this level of prospect achieved this status for a reason because of the numbers he's putting up these recruiting events.
Listen, you know how I feel about recruits. I've got to see them on campus. I've got to see these guys actually fill out the uniform before I talk good about them. This kid's going to be incredible.
Item number 8 here on our SEC Country Live 1st and 10. Speaking of Georgia kicker Rodrigo Blankenship, who's always been something of a folk hero to a lot of Georgia fans because of a unique look and some pretty big kicks for the Dogs, including a historic field goal at the end of the first half of the Rose Bowl that gave Georgia a chance to come back, win that game against the Oklahoma Sooners. Apparently Rodrigo has got some other talents besides kicking a football. As the kids say, he's good at spitting rhymes as well. Am I allowed to say that phrase?
I don't think
Can
so.
I say spitting rhymes?
Let's actually put that.
Michael says no. One of our producers says I should not say spitting rhymes.
Yeah, we should put that on the do not say board forever and forever.
Nonetheless, check out Rodrigo here cutting a brand new hip hop track. I got to tell you, I'm kind of impressed. This might be my new jam. Can I say that phrase?
Yeah, I don't know about that one either.
I've been told no on this as well. Judge for yourself if this is good music from Rodrigo Blankenship, the Georgia kicker.
Man.
Yeah, I know just what you're saying, right? You need to stick to kicking, but hear me out on this one. Go ahead, close your mouth and listen. It's time to switch it up right now and get up close some speed. We gon' move fast like our offense, they gon' score whenever we need. Gon' run the ball right down the field, you know that backfield stack. Got Swift and Brown and Holyfield all ready to attack. Got really not a crump and don't forget about me, Cole. Man, with all these weapons that we got, all we gon' do is score. We'll run it, pass it, throw some tricks and score by any means.
I mean, listen, I gotta tell you here, I think, I don't know if it's just the surprise of the guy that rocks the Rex Becks during the game is that, talented behind the mic, but I gotta tell you, I'm kind of impressed with Blankenship. I kind of had a little thing going there for a minute.
Like, whether or not it's a good song is just not the topic here for me. Like, this is so weird. Like, this is so weird for me. Like, why? I don't understand why this is happening. And because I brought this up before the show to Michael behind the glass. Do you remember last year when Sony Michel came out with a song?
Yes, essentially. I'm not 100% sure. It's essentially the same song.
Right. And then it was like Benny Snell from Kentucky, and we had like the rap battle in here. Like, who's the better song?
We did have
we were like, who's the better
MC
song?
battle, yeah.
And I hated both of them. Like, I was just like, why?
You can't hate this.
It's so mind-boggling to me.
See, like, this is a song, like Benny Snell was trying to be like Chance the Rapper. Like, it's just a song about college football. This is not. This is like team spirit here. This is like this is an anthem that fans can get behind.
I don't think it's a bad song. I just think it's weird coming from your kicker that wears Rex Specs. Does that make sense?
That's what makes it awesome.
It's like I'm not sure why this comes from this guy.
That's what makes it awesome.
I'll tell you this much. I'll take this 10 times over the Nick Starkle Justin Bieber video. Like 10 times without even batting an eye.
So you say this is better than that?
10 times better than the Nick Starkle video.
I was talking about spitting rhymes earlier. Michael O'Neill says, BA, you spit on the mic enough as it is. We don't need you to spit on anything else. I tell you who agrees with that is poor Mike Johnson, who I probably spit on 14 times a day during SEC Country Live.
Well, I'm sweating all over you anyway, so it's...
The SEC Country official account, Brandon Walker behind that today says, I have no words to describe Mike and BA reviewing a hip-hop song. Yeah, like... This may be the only time I've ever really weighed in. I mean, it may come as a big surprise. I'm actually not a expert on hip hop music. You may be surprised to find that out. The audience may be surprised to find that out. But you know what? I can kind of get behind Rodrigo there. He's actually going by, if I'm not mistaken, is it Blanco?
Blanco.
Which is kind of a cool hip hop name.
Yeah, I don't mind the name at all. I just there's so many lines to draw, and you guys are on me hardcore about why I don't like the song.
Oh yeah, you give it to him.
Devontae Lett, you just don't like UGA and rap. Listen, I don't love
Thanks,
UGA.
Devontae.
I don't.
Thanks, Devontae.
I don't love UGA, and I don't love rap. I wouldn't say I hate either one of them, but they're definitely not number one for me.
If I was a hip hop artist, do you know what my hip hop name would be?
Oh God,
Heavy Favorite.
We need to cut. That's number 10. That's bad.
Have a good day, everybody.
Yeah.
Anyway, let me move on here. Get to a ground that Mike may enjoy a little bit better. Let me do item number 9 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Interesting appearance for former Auburn head coach Gene Chizik on the radio station WJOX. That's in Birmingham, Alabama, making a big, bold statement about what Mississippi State may be able to do here in 2018. Chizik, like many of the analysts we've heard from in the last couple of days, is expecting big things from the Maroon and White Bulldogs. Here's what Chizik told WJOX. I think Joe Moorhead feels really, really good about this team. His coaching staff is really, really confident. He got 4 reallys in 2 sentences. Dan Mullen, you got to give him credit. I think he left the bases loaded, and he left them with a lot of talent, and confident talent at that. So he thinks that there's a chance that Mississippi State raises some eyebrows here in the SEC. Are you buying Chizik on this?
I'm 100% buying Chizik, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday. My thing is this, and this is what first popped out to me when I read raising eyebrows. Raising eyebrows, in my opinion, is not going to be good enough for Mississippi State fans this year. You raised eyebrows when you beat LSU last year. You raised eyebrows when you almost beat Alabama. Raised eyebrows in a lot of different areas. I don't think that's good enough this year to just raise eyebrows. I think you've got to beat some teams.
Yeah.
I think you've got to try to get a little bit closer to Auburn. I think you've got to try to repeat against LSU. I think you've got to beat the Texas A&Ms of the world. I think you've got to win some of these football games. Raising eyebrows is not going to get it done for Joe Moorhead this year.
Jermaine Tucker, who's a Mississippi State fan, says, Hail State. He, meaning Gene Chizik, knows the truth. But along the lines of what you're just saying there, you got to do more than just raise eyebrows. You got to be taking a legit step towards the next level for the program. I thought when Joe Moorhead, the Bulldogs head coach, when he joined Brandon Walker on More Cowbell, that's our SEC Country Mississippi State podcast, I thought that Moorhead was very candid about the subject you were just describing. This is great audio if you're a Mississippi State fan, and if your team plays the Bulldogs, it's certainly interesting. Here's Moorhead from More Cowbell.
I've seen that our kids love to compete. They're going to work hard. They're coachable. They're going to do what you ask them to do. But our challenge to elevate this thing from good to great is we've had 1 winning record in the SEC in the last 15 years. What we got to do to elevate this from a team that's good to a team that competes for a championship is to do the little things and have great attention to detail, discipline, accountability, work ethic, and selflessness. So we got to figure out a way to add the little things to the talent and the coaching.
James Ward in the Facebook comment section says the SEC West is tough. Raising eyebrows may be about all that Mississippi State's able to muster there. And you know, it's kind of an interesting admission there from Joe Moorhead in terms of having a winning record in the SEC. I didn't know this number, but I guess it's easy enough to believe. Just 1 winning record, you know, more wins than losses in the last 15 years there. And that does speak to what a significant challenge this is there in Stark Vegas.
Yeah, and that's kind of exactly my point, to where I think Dan Mullen raised eyebrows. I think he raised eyebrows with the team he was able to field year in and year out. Now, he had some teams that weren't that good, and he had some teams that were really good. And I just look at Joe Moorhead here in year 1, and I got to say that Dan Mullen has left the bases loaded and put Joe Moorhead up to bat. I mean, he really has. He has stocked the bases, and Joe Moorhead is up to bat, and anything less than like a bases clearing double is not going to get it done. Joe Moorhead cannot walk and have an RBI for a guy coming in and it be good enough. It's just he has too much talent and too good of a roster right now at Mississippi State for their fans to accept raising eyebrows. I just think you have to try to get to the 9-win plateau and beat a lot of SEC teams.
The problem, though, is it was 9 a year ago. So the next step is like that double-digit win. And for whatever reason, maybe this is just what seems like it's true more than it actually is true. Going from 9 to 10 seems like a huge threshold to cross because you're at Kansas State. Nobody's better against the point spread historically than Bill Snyder. You know, at Kentucky, I don't care about that. Florida, I said early in the show, I think that could be a win. I don't think that Mississippi State's made up 39 points worth of ground against Auburn, despite the fact the game's at Davis-Wade Stadium. At LSU, Baton Rouge, always a tough place to play. First year Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. They're going to want that game on October the 27th. That might be a toss-up. At Alabama, my gosh, going November to Tuscaloosa is a grizzly bear to deal with. Arkansas, they may win that game by 42 points. I don't think Arkansas is very good. At Ole Miss, I'm assuming that Mississippi State's better there. But getting that double-digit win from that schedule, man, that is not giving you a lot of room for error.
I agree with you. I think my only point, continuing off what I'm saying, is that this is as good as Mississippi State's roster has been in a really long time, and as good as it will be probably for the foreseeable future. This is as good as it's going to get. So if Joe Moorhead can't get them to 10 wins with the roster he has right now, then what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, raising eyebrows.
Well, that's a lot to ask for a guy that was an offensive coordinator just last year.
I'm just saying that the cupboard is as full as it's ever going to be for him, in my opinion. So if we're just raising eyebrows, that's what I'm saying. It can't be win the games you're supposed to, try to win some. You've got to win some of those games that nobody expects you to win, and it's got to start with the Auburns. It's got to start with LSU's, the Texas A&Ms. You got to be able to beat Ole Miss. You got to be able to beat Arkansas. You've got to knock off these teams if you're Mississippi State and you're trying to get to that next level, which you said is a 10-win plateau.
Here's the problem, and this is just a fact. What's tough for Mississippi State is, and this may be the best way to sort of articulate this, you look at their schedule, the games that they have circled, State fans, maybe even Joe Moorhead himself, the games that they have circled as wins, the opponent also has circled.
I know it.
Win. That's what's tough. And a lot of the SEC teams, it's not the case. A lot of SEC teams say, it'd be nice to win this game, but the other team's going to be the favorite. Mississippi State says win, 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 win. But in some of those games, the other team is looking at Mississippi State, like Auburn,
I agree,
like LSU, even though they lost the game last year, and saying, you know what, that's a win for us.
Yeah. I mean, I think, listen, even if you sit here and look at their schedule and say they'll lose to Alabama, they lose to LSU and Baton Rouge, they lose to Auburn, that still leaves you having to beat Texas A&M to get to that 9 wins. Or Kansas State, like you said, with Bill Snyder, going on the road to play Ole Miss at the end of the year. I'm just saying that's not eyebrow raising. That's just status quo.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there was a top 10 SEC team back, in 2014 that went to Manhattan on a Thursday night. Lucky to get out of there with a win. Even as a favorite, it's tough to win those games in Kansas State. Bill Snyder's just been that way. And ultimately, my take on Mississippi State here is a lot what I said about South Carolina earlier and some of these other issues. When you look at Georgia and Alabama, so clearly far above the rest in the pecking order in the SEC, there's a degree of wishful thinking. Gene Chiswick's an SEC network analyst now. Please let somebody in the SEC West make this interesting. Please let South Carolina make the SEC East at least a little bit interesting. I mean, that is just a wishful thinking on the part of these analysts stuff. Don't let this thing be a boat race by the middle of October.
I agree with you. I think that if a lot of people had their way, SEC Network included, maybe even SEC Country for that matter, you're looking at it and saying, boy, you hope South Carolina or Florida can get there. Boy, you hope Texas A&M, Mississippi State, somebody in these conferences that aren't the status quo to be let down can make some kind of noise against these teams.
Hardware to self-destruction on the YouTube page says like maybe Florida BA, and obviously there is a thought that Florida might be able to do that. So item number 10 here on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. We've been talking about those Bet DSI over-under season win prediction totals, and we'll obviously talk about all these SEC teams before it's all said and done. But let me, if you don't mind, go straight to the bottom of the page here. The 3 SEC teams with the lowest predicted win projection. It is a couple teams from the Volunteer State and, of course, Arkansas. Razorbacks, Vols, both at 5.5. Vanderbilt coming in at at 5 predicted wins of an over-under total there. Of this group, who ends up finishing with the fewest wins in the SEC? Is there a chance that the worst team is not on this page? What do you make of the bottom of the SEC right now? And can Jeremy Pruitt in his first year at Tennessee avoid that?
I think Jeremy Pruitt's at 6-6 this year. I think 5.5 wins. I would take the over in that. I'd put him at 6-6. Let me tell you who on this page is going to have trouble getting that number. Vanderbilt.
Really?
Vanderbilt.
I don't think so.
Vanderbilt has maybe the sneakiest, toughest schedule in the SEC.
Let me look at this.
I'm telling you right now. Look at their schedule and tell me Vanderbilt's not going to have a hard time getting to the 5-1 plateau, because even their non-conference games are not slam dunks. Even their non-conference games are not easy games. So
Middle Tennessee State's not easy. Nevada, the truth is I don't really know.
They're playing at Nevada, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
No, that's a home game in Nashville.
That's a home game.
At Notre Dame, that's no fun. South Carolina, Tennessee State, that's an easy win. At Georgia, Florida. in Nashville is a place where, Florida has not played well against Vanderbilt in a million years.
That's true.
A million years. That's not a guaranteed win for Florida there. At Kentucky, they actually go to Arkansas. That could be a fun one in terms of trying to stay out of the very bottom of the SEC cellar in Reynolds Razorback Stadium there.
I agree. I look at the schedule. I see one slam dunk win for Vanderbilt, and it's Tennessee State Tigers. I've got one should win. It's like you said. The ones that Vanderbilt look at and they're circling saying, man, we might can get this one. All those other teams are saying, oh, we can beat Vanderbilt. And that includes Middle Tennessee. That includes Nevada coming in there probably trying to make some noise. And Nevada, Notre Dame, and Middle Tennessee in back-to-back weeks is not an easy non-conference.
All right, been waiting all show for this. It's time to close out with our champion of life. And do you remember when LeBron James was upset with Alabama over what he thought was an infringement on his copyright of the barbershop-themed talk show? In fact, even during a media availability after an NBA game, LeBron took some of his time out to talk about what he didn't like about Saban, saying that they were going to keep doing the barbershop series. Here was LeBron James.
You guys know Nick Saban more than I do from a media perspective. I'm not saying you personally. From a media perspective, you guys know Nick Saban more than I do, so that's exactly what I would think he would say. But I built Uninterrupted for a reason, for us athletes to have a platform to be able to speak about whatever we want to talk about. I respect him as a coach, but I'll be damned if I allow someone to use our platform or try to do the same thing we're doing and just think it's okay. So the lawyers will figure it out.
So he says the lawyers will figure it out in terms of what he viewed as an infringement on his copyright by Alabama. But now apparently someone sort of views him kind of the same way here. TMZ reporting that now LeBron James is getting sued. Adventure Enterprises claims in a new lawsuit obtained by TMZ Sports, it pitched a TV show to LeBron called Shop Talk. The backdrop of the show is a barbershop where celebs share their business success while getting a haircut. The company claims it had numerous talks about the idea with LeBron's company, Uninterrupted, over a period of 2 years, fleshing out the idea and figuring out a strategy for pitching it to various networks. This is from TMZ, of course. And listen, LeBron James is probably getting sued 9 different times by 9 different people at any point in time in life. But there is an element of this that sort of feels like poetic
I
justice.
know it, and I'm trying not to let the Bammer come out in me, but I got to tell you, I cracked a smile when I saw this news roll across my screen. I was like, boy, that's poetic. And it just poking the bear at something you probably shouldn't be involving yourself with, and letting it come back around and get you.
Steve Weaver in the YouTube comment section says LeBron James just got processed by Nick Saban. That's pretty funny there, and a great way to close out our show today. If you missed any portion of the show, if you just want to hear it all again, we'll have the audio version up on all the various podcast channels, Apple Podcasts, Android devices, SoundCloud. Check it out. Become a subscriber if you want to listen to the show each and every day. And for those of you that watch the show on video, share the show with your friends on Facebook, YouTube. Let folks know that even during the offseason, we're having a good time every day talking about the SEC right here. We'll see you again tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live.